and then they asked that what are you wearing, are you not a Muslim, what are you wearing?
I feel like the laws were made by men to protect men.
And then they forced me to take off my dupatta right on the street.
What?
How is a woman going to protect herself from the harassment?
I feel like religion is just a tool at this point to police the bodies of women. Clearly, if you can't identify what's Quran versus what's calligraphy, then how fervent of a believer are you really?
Or I still haven't really put out that dupatta from my closet, and I think the day I'll finally be able to say that yeah, I'm back to normal. I think I'm still not.
So first of all, thank you for being here. I'm super happy we could make it, and I'm not sure where people are listening or watching or following, but wherever they are, it would be great. They could hit the follow button or subscribe button if my content resonates with them. So would you start off by introducing yourself and telling a little bit about you? You're a journalist, you're a poet, you're a researcher, and you have a lot of crazy stories to tell. You're from Pakistan, you're a woman, and I think for me that's a really great reason to have you already. But how would you add to that?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me today. It's actually a bit difficult when somebody asks you to introduce yourself, but I can try. I have been writing since the age of 11. I'm 30 now. I did not start mainly writing on women's issues earlier. It was mostly about the things that I would observe around me. When I got into serious journalism or serious reading, I would say, then my poetry also moved along with that, and then I started researching and exploring stories around me, particularly related to women's issues. But the about a woman that was called Virgin, and I submitted it to a magazine, Versification, and not only they published it, but they nominated it for Best of the Net Award 2021. I got the opportunity to talk to a lot of women in Mohenjo-daro and other rural areas for a UN Women project that I covered in 2023. So through that, I got a lot of taste of the rural life as well, and the kind of narratives women there have compared to, and what are the differences if we compare them to urban women.
You've been writing since you were 11. So I'm basically speaking to somebody who's been a poet for 2 decades. You're 30 now. That's wild. You're a journalist and you're a writer, so clearly you're right. You have a way with words. I read your article that you were wearing a dupatta in Karachi. You got a lot of backlash for it. Could you start off by telling what happened there? And also, like, just to explain to people who are listening or watching, what is a dupatta? Because I'm not sure a lot of people, everybody listening would be from Pakistan or from South Asia.
Sure. So, a dupatta is basically a veil that you can say that you basically drape on your shirt, I would say. It basically covers you from, the upper part of your body.
You can wear it on your head, you can wear it on your
Yeah.
shoulders, you can wear it however you like.
Yeah, exactly. The dupatta that I was wearing was inscribed with Arabic calligraphy, and I was basically going with my husband to buy books from Hassan Square. It's one of the very popular streets in Karachi. And while we were going on our way back there, then there were two guys on the bike who started
How were you commuting? Were you in a car? Were you on a bike? Were you on a bus? Were you walking?
We were on a bike.
Also on a bike, okay. And how
Yeah.
were you sat? Like he was riding the bike and you were behind him.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like that. They were also on the bikes, and they started chasing us from before. There's the street before Hassan Square. So from that street, and then they kept following us until Hassan Square. They started yelling. So firstly, I didn't really understand what exactly are they talking about. Also because I have this listening problem, and also because of the noise and the crowd and everything on the streets, it's difficult to hear. And sometimes also it happens that when I'm wearing a dupatta, so sometimes there are people on the bike who are like that, it's going to get stuck in the chain of the bike, so they just inform you. So I thought something like that, and I just put it like that. But then they kept chasing us, and then right on the bridge of Deepa Chaurangi, they actually started gathering people around us, and they were yelling that, aren't you a
What were
Muslim,
they
aren't you?
saying? when they started following you, how did you realize someone is following you or someone is like trailing the bike?
At that time, I couldn't follow, but when they started pulling the crowd towards us, then I heard them saying that, are you not a Muslim? So that was very surprising, and it caught me off guard, because I was like, where is this coming from? And then we kept going. I asked my husband to just speed up the bike and just get from there. And then they were like, they kept following us, and then
What kind
right.
of people were they? What language were they speaking? Was it a regional language? Were they speaking in Urdu?
They were speaking in Urdu. Right before we crossed the bridge, they asked my husband to stop the bike, and I was very scared, because they were so aggressive. The tone that they were using, I was very scared, and I asked my husband to just stop the bike, because I was very scared that if we did not stop the bikes, then I don't know what would happen. So we simply stopped our bike, and then those guys, they also stopped their bike, and then they asked that, what are you wearing? Are you not a Muslim? What are you wearing? So I was not even sure what are they talking about, because I usually am very careful whatever I'm wearing. So I was very confused, and so was my husband. So then they pointed towards my dupatta, and they were like that, do you know that there is this there are names of prophet and Allah written on it? And I was very shocked, because there was nothing like that. I mean, I couldn't really understand what's happening. So I asked my husband, and then he tried to actually explain to them, you are mistaken, it's nothing like that. But they were not really listening to us, and then they forced me to take off my dupatta right on the street, and
What?
just. Yes.
What? Oh my
Yeah.
god. So if you don't wear a dupatta, that's also a problem. Oh my
Yeah.
god, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
Then there were two other guys, because at that time mob started gathering. So there were two other guys, and then when they asked me to take off my dupatta, the two other guys started offering me their jacket. It was so weird. I mean, now I'm laughing about it, but it was so traumatic at that time. You have no idea. Then we refused, obviously, but and then while when I took off my dupatta, eventually they started going away. And while they were going, the guy was like that, if you hadn't took this off, then we would have rammed you with our bike. And yeah. So then thankfully they all went away, and then we just rushed from that place as far as we could. My husband was right on the bike. He was very scared that somebody might come again and follow us or something like that. And then I came home, and then I still didn't realize what had just happened. I wanted to cry, I couldn't even cry. Tears were not coming out from my eyes, and I was like, what just happened? And then I was constantly blaming myself that where I went
I'm so
wrong. It
sorry
was,
that you
yeah,
went
it
through
was like
this.
that.
This is horrendous. What time of the day was it? Was it like after sundown?
Yeah, it was around 10 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time.
Did you and your husband talk about this later and what really happened? And
Yeah, we did, because had it not been for my husband, I don't think so I would have been alive to talk to you right now. And we were actually, when we came home, then we were actually talking about this. We were just maybe a conversation away from becoming a news ourselves. That was the first sentence that my husband uttered when we came back home. It was that brutal of a situation. And I came home, and I was like, I don't know what to do about it, but I wanted to talk. I uttered a few sentences. I just lost my coherence. I just never wore that dupatta again. It's in a very hidden area of my closet. I don't even look at it, because it reminds me of the trauma that I and my husband had endured. And he actually basically helped me to talk about it. He was like, you are a journalist, you should talk about it, you should inform people. So I actually wrote a post about it on Facebook, which a lot of people resonated with. And then a lot of people messaged me later that this happened with some of our relatives as well. There was this guy who told me that one of his cousins was in the was at the park, and then there were other women who actually followed us and asked her to just take off her chadar. It was also had and it had some Sindhi calligraphy, if I'm not mistaken, written on it.
Yeah, I
And
mean, calligraphy is just kind of linked to Quran somehow. I don't understand why. I mean, Sindhi calligraphy is just, it's just not even Arabic, so there's no chance you're getting confused. But I guess the script looks the same.
I just want to add one more thing. So, because Manto, a very popular clothing brand in Pakistan, so they started the trend of these, inscribed clothing and that those
I've
dupattas.
seen
So
it.
yeah, so actually I reached out to, after this incident happened to me, and then recently this halwa incident also happened in Lahore, where they had to rescue the woman. You must have heard about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah, I
my
have.
incident happened like 6 months ago. Before that incident happened with that lady in Lahore, and when that happened, so I actually reached out to the director of Manto, and I actually asked them that we need to create these public service awareness campaigns, and I can help them without anything in return, to help them basically to create something like that, because we really need to make people aware about it. But then what I created a face after my message, they created a Facebook post that we don't condone such acts, and you can, if you think that it's risking your life, then don't wear. We never ask you to wear something like that if it's putting you in danger or something like that. So it was very pretentious coming from a big brand like them, and I
Yeah,
never
that is
reached out
so
it.
corporate. Like, I mean, they just don't understand. Like, they just don't read the room.
Yeah, they didn't. And it
Sounds so shallow.
I did not know what to do. So then me and my husband basically started a campaign which called Halwa is not blasphemy. We created our profile pictures and created Facebook stickers that we put on our profile pictures. And then we kept it going for like 2-3 months. And then we kept talking about it. People started mocking us like they did when my incident happened. So a lot of people said that, it's not true. It's not true. And then later people started calling me that, in your other pictures, you are not wearing a dupatta, so why are you even complaining now?
Like, you felt like you had to prove that you're not lying,
Yeah.
right? And this is so often the case in Pakistan with a woman. Like, you could be groped on the street and you just have to prove to people that you aren't lying. Why do you think the society has this reaction, like the first reaction of negativity, like you're lying?
As much as I have thought about it, I think it's coming from our own negativity, as well as our inherent, patriarchal beliefs that, if something has happened to women, then it must be her fault. It's some sort of internalized misogyny, I would say, that somehow we all have succumbed to, and somehow we don't want to change that part. And it's not just with women. I have seen that if something happened to somebody, then people are automatically blaming the person, that why did you need to do this, or because I don't know why people really feel the need to back the perpetrator in every situation.
But I don't think it happens to men as often as happens to us. Like, for example, like if you're on the street and somebody snatches your mobile phone, which is very common in Karachi, by the way,
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people like telling this person, why did you have an iPhone? Of course, there's always people who will always victim blame, regardless of gender, right? But the amount of victim blaming that goes into silencing a woman is just, it's uncanny. I haven't seen it. And I feel like that is so interesting because if someone comes to you and says to you, hey, today I was robbed at gunpoint in Karachi, nobody will have any trouble believing it because we all know that this happens, right? But if a woman says I was groped on the street, everybody will be like, what were you wearing? Why were you wearing this? You must have done something. You must have provoked this person. And this whole victim blaming thing. And to me, this is so scary. We've just created a culture where women are just not able to come out and talk about it. And I think you're totally right. You had your husband with you. I feel like in Pakistan, it empowers a woman if she has a man by her side.
There's this thing now, we say that, you need a, knight in the shining armor with you all the time. I guess that's exactly what you need. I mean, if you want to survive as a woman in Pakistan, unfortunately. And that's so sad that that is our definition of empowerment. Instead of, women being able to empower herself, we don't have these systems in place that can actually empower a woman. We need a man to actually, for to women to actually feel empowered. It's so sad.
About this incident, did you consider, like, I don't know, complaining? Maybe this sounds totally like completely outlandish that I say this, but did you consider anything else than writing an article in any other manner, going public with it, or I don't know, taking it to the next level?
Actually, I wanted to, but I was very scared for so many reasons. First reason was that this blasphemy word is a, it's a very triggering word for many. And there are many cases where people who have been falsely accused of blasphemy have been mob lynched before their cases went into the courts.
So, just to explain to the people who are listening or watching and they don't know, Pakistan's blasphemy laws are one of the most dangerous laws, I think, and this means that you are insulting the prophet, the final prophet of the last prophet of Islam, or doing something to uh, offend people about their faith, and this can go sideways very fast. So it could mean from saying something about the prophet and it can be misconstrued and you could be considered somebody who's offending the integrity and the finality of the prophet, to saying something that would hurt someone's sentiments, and then they would invoke these blasphemy laws on you. It's difficult for people to understand how much we use these laws to politically and socially victimize people.
Okay, so first reason was this, and the second reason was that I did not have any proof. Again, I had to present something, and I did not have anything. And people were disproving me so frequently on social media when I shared my story, that I also started thinking that I also need a proof in order to validate my point or my argument or my case. So I did not have anything like that. So which is why I did not do anything about it. I actually have a friend who's a civil judge in Karachi. So when I shared my story, and then when I started talking to her, I was like, I want to talk about it because I want to tell people what's happening. So she actually stopped me from going public because she was like, you don't know what could be the consequences for this. They could either, victimize you on social media, hack your account, uh, leak your videos or your photos. And secondly, what they can do is they can simply get you killed. So if you have a very strong backing with you, then only write a piece about it. So actually I took a lot of risk when I reported this issue, because a lot of people in my fraternity, whether they were judges, whether they were journalists, whether they were reporters, they actually, all of them actually stopped me from talking about it and putting it out
So
there.
there is
But I
no community support, actually.
no,
Very
nobody.
little.
Some people actually called me when they came to know about this issue, but there, when I started talking about it, there was no support from anybody, and not even my friends. And I completely understand them. I mean, nothing against them. I understand where they are coming from. We actually also thought of, maybe moving to some other place after this incident happened, changing our phone numbers, or doing something like that. We also had to plan all these things out when I reported this. And my husband really supported me through thick and thin and everything. He was like, you just do it, I'll be there for you, you don't need to worry about anything. But yeah, so there were a lot of things in place when we were, I was discussing this.
What steps did you need to take in order to write this article and then ensure that you're safe?
I was just focused on what I want to talk about and what I want to report. As a journalist, I am actually very crazy when it comes to my stories. If I have to talk about something, if I feel that I need to report it, I need to do something about it, then I do it. It was my husband who was doing all this thinking that, if something happened to her, then this is how am I going to protect her. But when the piece was published, he was like, I was very worried for you, because I had to think. He actually located all the places where he could. send me to. And then we also actually were thinking to buy another sim or something
What kind of places? Like, I mean, outside of the city or?
outside of the city, or most probably outside of the country. Yeah. And then we also thought that I would be completely going incognito or incommunicado on social media for a while. So deleting my account or something like that, deactivating my socials, basically removing all my social presence. These were the things that were going on in his mind. You can simply google my name and a lot of results come up. And this is something that they say that once everything is on is on the internet, then you can't do anything about it. So it was like removing me basically from social media in a way that people don't know that I exist, something like that. Or maybe changing my name. A lot of things were going on.
Wow, and what was the conversation with the editors like when you pitched the story? And did they discuss any kind of risks with you that would come with the story?
No, the editor did not. But everybody else around me, from all communities, influencers, journalists, everybody, they were very concerned about it. And I actually have my cousin brother who actually runs a communist movement. And I actually, when I wrote that piece, I shared it with him. And then he I first thing I asked, what if something happened to me, are you going to do something about it? So he was like, I can't promise. Yeah, so there was apparently no support from family, friends, acquaintances, nothing like that. And I was so crazy that I still wrote about it.
Oh, that's very interesting. I'm curious. Do you think incidents like these, because they've become so common, do you think these incidents are fueled by internalized misogyny and the need to control a woman and what she's wearing? Or is this just, in your opinion, religious extremism?
Actually, it's all the factors that you have just shared. It's internalized misogyny actually starts from there. And then obviously there is this need to put controls, and then basically decide that what a woman can do and can't do based on their personal opinions as well as their misogynistic beliefs. And thirdly, of course, it's religious extremism. And also I would want to add another thing, that there's this culture prevalent in Pakistan, where not just men, I would say there are some women as well who want to put basically who want to barricade women from doing anything that they would like. And it's very sad when you see women doing this to women, but unfortunately that's also a case. And then men are again doing this. And then we don't have just we all always talk about gender based violence, but we don't really talk about the things that actually perpetuate that. And it's again it starts from their internalized beliefs that they have the right to control a woman, decide what she can do, what she cannot do, decide her freedom for her, without really regarding the fact that we all are born free. They don't need to give women freedom for something that she is entitled to by society or by the virtue of being herself. But they do it. And yeah, so it's all form of that. And then there are people in Pakistan, they which use religion as per their own interpretation. So if they will come with come across something that they would feel that is restricting a woman, then they would use it in order to restrict a woman in whatever they way they can. So it's all the factors. There are a lot of things that we really don't talk about. We go really broader when it comes to women's issues, I feel. We don't really talk about what changes we need to make from the grassroots level.
I can imagine that a bit of this has to do with religious extremism, but I can't imagine a man going through this exact situation if he were to wear a shawl or a turban with calligraphy on it. I mean, critics will argue, and haters will, and trolls would argue that only women are wearing it because brands are making it for women. People will look for excuses, but the truth is that if you go in the northern parts of the country where it gets really, really cold, People wear all sorts of things, and I can't imagine a man going through this.
There could be counseling for women and men as well, where they are taught that they can practice whatever they can, particularly women, because men already know that they don't need that, but they also need to be told that they don't need to control women, and women have a right to do whatever they want to.
How old are these men that you want to counsel? I'm really interested. Like, are they like grown men, 20-year-old men? You can sit them down somewhere and counsel them? I don't think that that's gonna work. Do you think that works?
I mean, I have actually seen, my husband doing that actually. He has actually talked to a couple of men and actually made them understand that where they are wrong, and actually, help them realize where they can help their wives and their, sisters and their mothers. So it actually helps. So I think maybe a good conversation can really help them. That's what I have believed, because my husband has
Okay.
actually counseled people ranging from like 18 to 60. So and it
18 to
has,
60.
yeah,
How does he find these people?
he actually talks to a lot of people. Like, he sits on this dhaba of ours that's actually located right near my home. So he actually sits there, and then he randomly starts talking to people, and then he's a very good storyteller. So people, like to talk to him, listen to him, and he's always the advice giver in the
This is a
community.
lot
And
of time to exhaust on people who have never made the effort to educate themselves. I mean, I
yeah,
appreciate his contribution to the society, but I wouldn't counsel men. It's the last thing I would do. I mean,
I also think
I
the
feel like I've
same.
run out of
Yeah.
patience for it. This is basically the problem. I mean, I think you narrated a problem from a very personal lens. How do you feel about this whole incident now, the dupatta incident that happened with you, like when you're leaving the house? Has it changed the way you feel when you're leaving your house, when you're leaving your premises?
It has not changed, but I constantly am overthinking whenever I step out of my home. I haven't changed my dressing, I haven't changed anything about myself, but this overthinking is something that I have to deal with on a daily basis. And I have to think from my perspective, then I have to think from how other people are going to view me. And it's very problematic, and it's very traumatic for me, I would say, because and then I haven't really been on a bike for a while, not because of this incident, but due to some other reasons. So I don't know if I start riding it again, will I be comfortable, or will I have some reservations about it? I'm not really sure. But now, if anybody is even looking at me just randomly, I feel uncomfortable. And these random furtive glances from people, just maybe even if they are looking at my husband, not me, I constantly feel that I'm on the center stage, and I'm in the limelight, and people are there to victimize me. Somehow I have had this, I don't know whether it's victim complex or whatever that is, but I have this. And I also have that I also was diagnosed with PTSD after this incident happened to me. And I'm still reeling from the effects of that, because it has shaken me to the core. I still haven't really put out that dupatta from my closet, and I think the day I'll finally be able to say that, yeah, I'm back to normal. I think I'm still not.
Wow. I'm really sorry to hear that. It must be very difficult. And thank you
It
for sharing
has.
this story.
And it is also difficult because a lot of people around me who told me that I was the one who actually invited them to do whatever they could, or to harm me in whatever way then they can, by simply wearing a dupatta. And then it was wrong for me to wear that dupatta in the first place. So that is too much. I mean, this is something that I'm really dealing with. I'm constantly creating counter arguments that no, it was not my fault, it was not my fault. But I can't really utter that because right now nobody's asking me those questions. So my answers are like left in a limbo or something like that.
Yeah, it's constant mental torture to have these thoughts in your mind. And this is becoming a lot more worse. This has gotten a lot worse in the past few years, and we've seen more and more incidents of women being harassed. And I feel like religion is just a tool at this point to police the bodies of women.
Yeah. Yeah.
I personally don't want to comment, and I don't want to also to put myself in danger, but I don't think a lot of people who are policing women like that even care about Islam the way they pretend that they do. Because clearly, if you can't identify what's Quran versus what's calligraphy, then how fervent of a believer are you really? I think it's just a tool to control women's bodies,
Yeah.
and it's just another excuse. But thank you for speaking with me, and I think we will close here.